Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today we're going to take a look at the Cold Steel Storm Cloud. This was sort of Cold Steel's, premier knife for this year, if you will. We've got premium steel up here, the 20CV. We've got a carbon fiber overlaid over G10, and we will discuss that a little bit as we go along. But I will say that I was pretty attracted to this design. I like the blade steel. I kind of like the blade shape, and the overall look was pretty appealing to me. So I thought I'd pick one up and go ahead and share it with you. So let's go ahead and get into this guy, beginning with size and weight, which is sort of where we always start things off. This knife is 8¼ inches overall. The blade length is 3½ inches. Handle is 4 13/16, so just a bit more than 4 3/4. That's the closed length in pocket. It's only 7/16 thick, which is quite nice and slim. And the weight on this guy is 3.7 ounces, and that's on my scale. I think Cold Steel lists them on the box as 3.5 ounces, I think is correct. Anyway, so it came in a little heavier than that when I weighed it myself. Oh, so let's go ahead and get into this blade. This is one of the standout features of the knife, 20CV steel, which is really, really nice. We have this Tanto grind with a swedge on top and sort of a zero grind at the tip here. And it is a convex zero grind, which I actually really like in terms of stability and toughness. That's a really nice way to go. The rest of the blade down here is, of course, flat ground, and it is nice and thin behind the edge and very sharp. We're pretty much used to that from Cold Steel at this point. Now, I will say this by way of a minor criticism. Design-wise, well, I guess blade-wise, there are a couple little things here. So I actually prefer Tanto blades where the tip is a little higher up. So where this angle not quite as steep, I would like this just a little bit more, but that's purely aesthetic. That's purely my preference. The other thing I will say is the grind lines on the swedge here. So you see the swedge on this side and that side. It's not very, I don't know if you'll be able to see it on video, but in person, you can see that those lines are, those grinds are a little uneven. Otherwise, though, everything is really nice, especially the steel. And in terms of, utility, this is where this blade really does shine. I've talked about this before, but Tantos work really nice. They give you that secondary tip that can often be used with, so you don't have to get the knife as steep for cutting tasks. And then you've got tons of straight edge here for all those sort of day-to-day EDC tasks, cutting rope and opening packages and cardboard and everything else that you may have. The biggest, again, the biggest limitation on a Tanto blade is they're not ideal for food prep. I mean, they'll work, and I've cut up a few apples with this, and that's fine, but they're not really ideally suited to that. The other thing about this blade that I feel like I should point out is that the thumb disc here can, as you can see, get in the way of the cutting path. So if I'm cutting way back here, my material can run into that. I don't really, that doesn't happen to me in use, but theoretically it could happen in the perfect circumstances, okay? So that's something definitely to be aware of. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about the action a little bit. It is a triad lock, which we're pretty used to at this point. Pretty stiff back spring. It does snap into place pretty firmly, so it takes a bit of effort to unlock that. There are some modifications that you can do, including just leaving the knife open for a while to help with that. The one thing that this knife does have is a wave disc here. So you can, with a bit of practice, get this to wave open out of pocket, just doing what I'm doing right now, so that if my finger is sort of the edge of your pocket, you're gonna pull it toward the back and it will catch the blade and pull it out for you. So that is something that can, a number of Cold Steels have that. They usually work fine, and this one is no exception. I will say it does take a little bit of practice. I don't know, I rarely ever do that. I don't see a great deal of usefulness in it. And especially in this particular knife, okay? This knife to me is sort of aiming at, being a higher end knife, almost a gentleman's knife. And then you've got this sort of very tactical feature that should belong on, something like a Talwar or a Recon 1. So that's a little bit of a disconnect there. And in some ways, we could almost say the same thing about the blade shape. This blade shape is, designed for, or at least one of the things this blade shape is good for is stabbing. And so that's kind of leaning toward more of a tactical philosophy of use, well, the handle does not fit that philosophy of use at all. Okay, so I do have that sort of, this is sort of a weird knife in that sense. Now, there's a redeeming quality about that too, and we'll talk about it as we kind of move through the rest of the knife. But action here, I think most of us are pretty familiar with the triad lock at this point. Extremely strong, can be difficult to unlock, and there you go. Now, and I guess I did want to note that it does have that wave feature that does work pretty effectively if you want to do that with your knife. Now, let's talk about the handle and the ergonomics. First off, let me say, I've often said this, I really, really like the way Cold Steel constructs their knives. This one is not that different from a number of other models that they have where it's primarily G10 in the handle and then there's a bit of metal to facilitate the lock bar and the pivot and everything like that working well. And then they've got a couple of inserts to facilitate the screws. Otherwise though, this is going to be mostly G10 with a carbon fiber overlay. So that's how they've built this. And I do like that because it creates a very strong knife that's still very, very lightweight. And so, 3.7 ounces is really, really nice. And you do notice when you pick this up. Now, my complaint about the construction on this knife is for the price point, okay? At $167, this should be real carbon fiber, and that would actually reduce that weight even a little bit further. Not that it's heavy at anyway, but they sort of play up this theme in their advertising that it's like as light as a cloud, but it's, it's very strong and useful. So it's got that storm cloud, right? It's a cloud, but it's still dangerous and powerful and stuff. So anyway, it would have been nice to see this actually carbon fiber, but they decided to go the G10 laminate. And here's the biggest thing about this. My biggest complaint here is the way they did it. It looks cheap. It really does. I would have loved this knife, and I wouldn't be saying anything about this if they had done the carbon fiber laminate the way, say, Spyderco does. If you look at like the Domino or any of those, where there's a bit of a texture on the carbon fiber, that works really, really well. This is just, a very thin, essentially carbon fiber sticker that they've stuck on top of G10. And my thought is, why? For one, the knife was fine as just G10, okay? You didn't need the carbon fiber in the first place. And if you're gonna do it, then do it right, okay? So my big complaint is the way they've done the carbon fiber here, and here's one of the things that bothers me. So here's the carbon fiber off of the Rat Model 1 in D2, and you can see they look almost the same. In fact, the Rat Model 1 may look even a little nicer than the Cold Steel. And so that's a little bit disappointing, their choice to do the carbon fiber laminate and to do it the way that they did, okay? One, I would have been happier if they just went with G10. Two, I would have been happier if they just went with carbon fiber. Number three, if they would have done a carbon fiber overlay the way that other companies have done them. So if you look at the Spyderco Zabo or the Domino or a number of others, they did an overlay, but they provided some extra texturing that was sort of incorporated into it, and it made it look a lot classier and feel better in hand. And finally, that brings us to the ergonomics. I will say this knife is very comfortable in hand. The thumb disc provides a nice rest for your thumb. The The design here lands nicely on my fingers. All of the edges are nice and smooth. And so even with a pretty tight grip, it's really, really good. In a reverse grip or any other kind of grip, I find no hot spots or anything like that. The dual position clips, you can do left side or right side tip up carry. And that clip doesn't provide any hot spots at all. And in fact, this is one of the better clips from Cold Steel. It goes in and out of pocket very well. And of course, that is aided by the fact that we've got this smooth carbon fiber. So that's, I guess, to be noted. So that's where I am on handle construction and ergonomics. It's fine. It's not that this is going to fall apart or I have any issue with the quality of the construction. It's just the choices that they made to go with the laminate over full carbon fiber or over G10. I would have liked either one of those better. Otherwise though, it is well done. It's very comfortable in hand. And so I do like that. And they've done a pretty good job with the shape here so that even though this just carbon fiber is smooth, I find the knife still very grippy and very confidence inspiring. So that is, again, something that I will give them credit for making a very comfortable comfortable knife and one that I feel I can get a lot of work done with, even though it's got the carbon fiber overlay. Let's go ahead then and get to some comparisons. You've already seen one, and that of course was the Rat Model 1. Primarily bring this in just because everyone is so familiar with it. You can see these knives are fairly close in size, although the Stormcloud does a better job in terms of blade to handle ratio. Let's grab, actually I'm going to save the cold steels for the end, so we'll grab a couple other things first. If you're looking for something thin, lightweight, slices really well, the Manly Peak is a great option. Sorry, those aren't quite centered. The Manly Peak is a great option and provides something just a little bit different, sort of like a cold steel and a Spyderco had a baby. Oh yeah, I just happen to have this in my pocket today, so let's throw the Inkosi in there. There we go with that is a really high-end knife. And this is a knife that does a great job of striking that balance between being classy and high-end while still being very useful and practical. Even, could be rolled into, even could fit the role of a weapon if it needed to. Hopefully that would never ever happen because primarily, of course, knives are just for cutting stuff. But this is sort of a high-end utility knife done right. Okay, this is a high-end utility knife that kind of could have done a couple things better. Let's grab some cold steels now. Some of my favorites. Here is the American Lawman. Great knife, a little slimmer, but I would probably be, anyway, great knife, really highly recommended. Just one of my favorite all-around knives, and of course one of my favorite cold steels. I've got another knife that fits as one of my favorite cold steels as well. This is the Ultimate Hunter. Again, really nicely done, highly utilitarian, extremely comfortable in hand, useful blade shape, just a wonderful knife. And the Stormcloud just doesn't quite get to the level in terms of utility that this one does. Finally, how could we talk about cold steel without bringing in the Formax for comparison? Now, here's a knife that really is high-end, very expensive, but extremely useful, cuts really well, comfortable in hand, tough as it can possibly be. So there's some comparisons for you. Okay, so let's go ahead and give you my overall thoughts on this knife. Cold Steel has done a pretty cool design here, and I'm sure some people will see this and be extremely attracted to it. Certainly, I do like this design. There are a couple things that I feel like were misses here, primarily the choice to go with the carbon fiber on the carbon fiber laminate on the handle. And the way they've ground the blade, I would have liked to see this tip just a little bit higher, make it more of a traditional looking tanto. Cold Steel does great tantos and I usually really like them. But with the grind being a little off and the tip being as low as it is, it's not my favorite way of doing a tanto blade. Now, it may be yours, so that's very subjective. This knife is very comfortable in hand. It's very well built. The blade is useful and it's a great steel. And the only issue, the last thing I would say in sort of my overall take is it's probably just priced a little bit high for what you're getting. So overall, good knife, highly useful, great steel, cool design, lots of things going for this knife, but a couple things that make it, almost awesome instead of just totally great. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will talk to you soon.